Hello, and welcome to Classic Lesbian and Sapphic Literature. I'm Gray, and I am an autistic lesbian who has a special interest in all things lesbian: history, community, art, etc. A while ago, I started thinking about how regular people have all these classic books and works to read from, but where are the lesbian and sapphic classic books? So I decided to take a look. Turns out there's quite a few. Lesbian and sapphic literature has a varied and often difficult history. The subject of lesbianism has obviously been taboo over the centuries, and so books containing lesbian themes, plots, or characters were often banned or not published at all. There was a time period where, due to strict censorship codes, all homosexual characters had to have tragic endings, as a kind of moral for the readers that homosexuals always get what they deserve in the end. The lesbian character was often portrayed as a villain, with dark designs on the heroine. She has obsessive traits and fawns over the heroine in a sickly kind of manner. See Carmilla from the novel Carmilla by J. Sheridan Le Fanu. Despite the censorship and homophobic responses from the public, many lesbian works have made it through unscathed, or fairly unscathed. Luckily for us, that era ended, and lesbian literature is alive and thriving. I have compiled a list of what I think are some of the most influential works of lesbian literature, and I am going to be going over them in a series on my channel which is titled Classic Lesbian and Sapphic Literature. Enjoy! Hello, and welcome to the first episode in a new series here on my channel called Classic Lesbian and Sapphic Literature. Today we are going to be covering Sappho of Lesbos, the iconic poet from archaic Greece. This is my copy of If Not Winter, the translation of Sappho's poetry, translated by Anne Carson. I had a fantastic time delving into Sappho's poetry and her beautiful use of words and her love of women. As you can see, I did annotate it quite a little bit. I also had a fun time exploring my not very good but artistic side by drawing in the book a little bit. But today I am going to take you on a journey of exploring Sappho. Sappho was an archaic Greek poet from Erosos on the island of Lesbos and was probably born around 630 BC. Not much is known for certain about her life. It's estimated that she wrote over 10,000 lines of poetry. However, only 650 lines survive today. Many of those are merely fragments of what they originally were. Very few are actually complete. Her impact on poetry and culture in general is not to be understated, as she has been quoted and referenced by her contemporaries and many others during her life and in the centuries beyond, right up until the modern day. Sappho's sexuality is heavily debated. Her homosexuality was often erased over the centuries due to homophobia, with many trying to explain it away or completely ignore it. Not everyone ignored it, however, and sometimes she was used as an example of lesbian attraction and lesbian desire. Some now say that she was what we would call bisexual, while others say that she was a lesbian in the modern sense of the word. However, so little is known about her life that it is quite impossible to determine what her exact sexuality was, as well as remembering that our modern words to describe sexuality didn't exist when Sappho was alive. So it is almost entirely impossible to determine how she would have identified. The only way to do that would be to talk to her directly, and obviously we can't do that as she has been dead a very, very long time. What we do know is that she definitely had attraction to women and thus was queer. Sappho's poetry has inspired sapphics and lesbians for centuries. Sappho is who we get the terms sapphic and lesbian from. Sapphic is based off of her name and is for any non-man who loves women. And lesbian comes from the island where she lived, lesbos, and means non-men loving non-men exclusively. Her extensive use of violets lying in the lap of a fair lady is why violets have become a Sapphic symbol. The Isle of Lesbos is a popular vacation destination for Sapphics and lesbians, with multiple lesbian bars and even a lesbian festival. Her surviving fragments of poetry have left an indelible mark on lesbian and Sapphic literature. When reading Sappho, I divided her poetry into 3 categories: her love poems to women, hymns to Aphrodite and other deities, and poems where her female companions/lovers are mentioned by name and or contain lesbian themes. There are plenty of poems that don't fall into these 3 categories, however, such as her hymns for weddings and the poems about her brother. The diss track poems she wrote about a beautiful courtesan who she thinks married her brother for his money, as well as fragments of an epic poem that was the story of some characters from the Iliad. However, it is not complete. The rest of what we have from her are simple words and sometimes phrases that don't make up an entire poem, as the rest have been sadly lost to time. According to the Lesbian Historic Motif podcast, which by the way is a podcast that I highly recommend if you're looking into lesbian and sapphic history, her hymns to deities and her songs for weddings show that she was an established and respected member of her community. So her poems about women show that to some degree her attraction to and relationships with women were somewhat acceptable to the community. Of the complete poems we have of Sappho, the very first that I read is a love poem about a woman who has scorned Sappho's love. In it, Sappho begs Aphrodite to not break her heart with hard pains and to come to her aid in matters of love. Aphrodite does come and asks who she should persuade to love her and who is wronging her. She then goes on to say that she, the woman Sappho loves, will soon come to love Sappho, whether willingly or unwillingly. At the beginning of the poem, Sappho refers to Aphrodite as one who twists lures. Aphrodite has caught Sappho in one of these lures, which is the unrequited love that Sappho now finds herself stuck with. This is why Sappho is begging Aphrodite not to break her heart. Aphrodite then says that the woman who loves Sappho, even if it becomes unwilling, thus ensnaring this woman as well in one of her lures. At the end of the poem, Sappho asks Aphrodite to, quote, be her ally. This is a good double entendre, for Symmachia, I think I'm pronouncing that right, I will have it put up on the screen here, Symmachia, or ally in love, is one of Aphrodite's cult epithets. It is a beautiful poem full of rich imagery. It's interesting as well that the first complete poem of Sappho's we have is a love poem to a woman and contains mentions of Aphrodite. The mention of Aphrodite plus a woman that Sappho is in love with in a poem are often mentioned together, with Sappho petitioning Aphrodite's help in a matter of love. So I have come to associate the two together during my readings of Sappho's poetry. This association is important, especially when it comes to Fragment 102. Fragment 102 is extremely famous, especially in the lesbian and sapphic community. Sweet mother, I cannot work the loom. I am broken for longing for a girl by slender Aphrodite. There are many different translations of this poem, sometimes going, sweet mother, I cannot weave, for Aphrodite has overcome me with longing for a girl. It all depends on the translator. The problem is that Sappho used an ambiguous term that could mean either man or woman, and since most translators have been homophobic over the centuries, they have translated it to mean boy, as is the case in the Anne Carson translation. Now, obviously, Anne Carson is not homophobic to my knowledge, but it is interesting that she decided to translate it to mean boy when other translators have left it ambiguous or translated it as girl. I mention this as Sappho's attraction to women and mentioning Aphrodite being the cause or needing to help is a theme in Sappho's love poetry to women. Lesbian themes in her poetry show up in fragment 22, when she mentions two female companions she has attraction and love for, and says that Aphrodite herself once blamed her, "Because I prayed this word, I want." What is more lesbian than being ostracized by a deity for expressing your desire for a woman, or by being ostracized by society for that matter? In fragment 23, she compares her female lover to golden-haired Helen, the very same Helen of Troy, and says, "From every care you could release me." In fragment 24c, the words we have left of it form the sentence, "We live blank, the opposite blank, daring." I almost see this as a form of blackout poetry, where we are missing the full context, but even with missing the full context, it still shows a lesbian theme. Lesbians have always lived in opposition to the cis-heteropatriarchy, daring to be ourselves. Many fragments of poems are simply random words coupled with the name of a female companion or lover, especially Attis. In fragment 31, a poem that I have fondly nicknamed Gay Panic, Sappho describes how the man who gets to sit opposite the woman in question is equal to the gods. She says that, and I quote, "For when I look at you, even a moment, no speaking is left in me." I think we've all had moments where we've been just so in love with a woman that we are left speechless. Sappho continues on to say that the woman makes her have a cold sweat, shake, and make her skin feel as if a fire races under it simply because of how lovely her laugh is. The phrase, quote, "but all is to be dared," shows up again at the end of the fragment, once again showing Sappho daring it all for the love of a woman. In fragment 81, she describes a female companion putting flowers in her hair and comments on how soft her hands are. In fragment 94, one of these female companions says that she, quote, "unwillingly leaves Sappho," and Sappho expresses grief at her leaving, but also remembers the beautiful times they had together, once again mentioning flower crowns, the girl's soft throat, and then saying, quote, "and on a soft bed, blank, delicate, blank, you would let loose your longing," end quote, which to me sounds like a euphemism for sex. And in fragment 129b, she expresses jealousy, saying, quote, "or you love some man more than me," end quote. This in particular contains very strong lesbian emotions to it, as I think we've all had a moment where, you know, when you're younger, you're in one of those very homoerotic friendships what you had when you were younger, and you didn't understand why you were so attached to your friend, and they get a boyfriend or they have a crush and you're jealous because you feel like they love this man more than you. And finally, another of the most famous of her fragmented poetry, I quote, "someone will remember us, I say, even in another time," end quote. And this could not be more true, for Sappho and her lovers and her love of women have been immortalized in the lesbian and sapphic community over the centuries. She is an ancestor of our community, an absolute incredible poet, so much so that her words have stayed with us all these centuries and centuries later. And her impact upon us through those centuries, right up to today, cannot be understated. So I hope you enjoyed our little dive into Sappho's poetry, and I highly recommend that you check out her poetry for yourself and enjoy her beautiful words and excellent poetry. I will see you in the next episode of this series, where I think we will be covering Carmilla by J. Sheridan Le Fanu. See you next time!